With Dan Quinn officially hired as the next head coach of the Washington Commanders, who are the coaches that he's going to consider to bring in as his next offensive coordinator? Today we're going to discuss my top 15 list of the top offensive coaches available for Coach Quinn to decide from. But before we get into today's list, do me a favor, click that subscribe button, because whenever Coach Quinn ends up hiring his OC for the 2024 season, we're going to have you guys covered with a video for you guys 100% free. Every time there's breaking news this offseason, every time the Commanders sign somebody, every time they trade for somebody, every time they make a draft pick during the NFL draft this year, we're going live with a video right here on the Commanders Report. So do me a favor, click that subscribe button right now. So before we talk about offensive coordinator candidates, let's talk about the guy that's most likely going to be the next defensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. That's going to be Joe Whitt Jr., the Dallas Cowboys secondary coach, who of course worked alongside Dan Quinn there with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, there was some speculation that Whitt might become the new defensive coordinator there in Dallas, and nothing has been officially official so far, but it's looking like Joe Whitt Jr. is going to be the guy Dan Quinn brings on as his defensive coordinator here in Washington, and honestly, I like the hire. So let's go over the offensive coordinator names here to consider, starting with the guys that I think are less likely but have play calling experience, starting with Byron Leftwich, former NFL quarterback, former Super Bowl winning offensive play caller with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in 2020 when Tom Brady was there in Tampa. Now his final season there in 2022 with the Buccaneers didn't go all too well, was out of football for 2023, and he still hasn't gotten an interview for an OC position this year, so it's going to be interesting to see if Byron ends up going anywhere during this cycle. And speaking of guys that have been failures and guys that were out of the league, at least in the second half of the season last year, Frank Reich, the former head coach of the Carolina Panthers and Indianapolis Colts, one of the only coaches in NFL history to be fired by two separate organizations mid-season in consecutive years, all right? So I understand why Commanders fans would not be interested in a guy like Frank Reich, but you got to remember, he got his roots as a Super Bowl winning offensive play caller with Doug Peterson and the Philadelphia Eagles, revolutionizing the game with that RPO-heavy scheme. And if you're bringing in a rookie quarterback that's really good at running RPOs, Frank Reich might be a decent fit if you want to go that route. Then we go to number 13 here, and somebody that I think is probably less likely. I think that he's probably more likely to go to Seattle with Mike Macdonald. Greg Roman, former offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens and the San Francisco 49ers with Jim Harbaugh. So he's worked for both Harbaugh brothers, so it's possible that Macdonald there in Seattle, he has those Harbaugh connections, could get Roman. But here with the Washington Commanders, it's something to consider because you have an opportunity to get a really good rusher of the football at the quarterback position in Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner out of LSU. And if you pair Greg Roman, and who's, in my opinion, the best quarterback run game designer in the history of the National Football League, with a guy like Jaden Daniels, who is a dynamic, explosive athlete with his legs. I mean, we saw what Roman was able to do for Lamar Jackson's career in his early years of development. I absolutely think that that's something that could work if Dan Quinn wants to go out and get Jaden Daniels with that number 2 overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. Now, grade this pairing. If the Commanders decided to hire Greg Roman and then draft Jaden Daniels, how would you grade that combination of OC and quarterback? Give me an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F for me down there in the comment section for today's pinned comment. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here at some point during this video. When that happens, grade this potential pairing of Greg Roman and Jaden Daniels. Then we go to the guy that probably would have been Dan Quinn's offensive coordinator had he got a job last year, Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer. Now, I think it's much less likely now, and we'll explain why here in just a second, but let's talk about Albert Breer on his report after the Dan Quinn hiring about how Schottenheimer was his favorite to be OC last year, but now it's going to be a little bit tougher. He says, had Dan Quinn taken a head coaching job last year, he'd have taken Brian Schottenheimer with him as offensive coordinator. More complicated this time around because Schottenheimer has the OC title in Dallas. Now, would the Cowboys let him out to call plays for a division rival? And the answer to this question, guys, plain and simply, is I seriously doubt it. I do not think the Dallas Cowboys are going to allow Schottenheimer to be able to go to a division rival here. I think that's extremely, extremely unlikely. So I think that Dan Quinn is most likely going to have to find somebody other than Schottenheimer to be his offensive play caller in 2024. Then we get to number 11 here, and we get to somebody that I think that, I would probably have higher on my list if I were Dan Quinn, but he doesn't necessarily have the connections with Quinn's circle. It's Josh McDaniels, former head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders and Denver Broncos, and of course the former OC of the New England Patriots, where he won all those Super Bowls with Tom Brady. And I know some people are going to say it was Tom Brady's deal there. He completely carried Josh McDaniels, but you have to remember he took a rookie Mac Jones. And Mac Jones actually looked like a franchise quarterback his rookie season with Josh McDaniels. 67.6 completion percentage, over 220 yards per game, and a good touchdown to interception ratio there. He went to a freaking Pro Bowl his first year in the league. I mean, after everything has kind of gone downhill for Mac Jones over these past couple of seasons, it's kind of crazy to think. But Josh McDaniels is one of those guys that really puts his quarterbacks and his personnel in the right positions to succeed. And I absolutely think now that Bill Belichick didn't get hired anywhere this cycle, I think you could be a pretty decent hire here in Washington, especially for a guy like Caleb Williams, Drake May, or even Jaden Daniels. Then we get to number 10 here, and I'll go with Luke Getsy. And, this is kind of the opposite of Josh McDaniels. I would like a Josh McDaniels hiring. I would not like a Luke Getsy hiring. The only reason why I put him in my top 10 is because he is a part of that Shanahan tree. He knows Mike LaFleur, Matt LaFleur. He knows all these different guys. He knows Kyle Shanahan. He's worked with a bunch of these guys throughout his career. And since I think Quinn is going to be expected to potentially get somebody from that West Coast tree with Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, that Luke Getsy, somebody that's interviewed for some OC positions this year, could be an option for the Washington Commanders. But I really hope that doesn't happen because he kind of sucks. Then we got number 9 here, Frank Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. And this is another situation where the Dolphins would have to give Frank Smith permission here to go to Washington. But I absolutely think that Mike McDaniel will do that because he's the offensive play caller there in Miami. He understands that Frank Smith probably wants an opportunity to call plays elsewhere. And listen, man, for somebody that's working directly under and working with one of the best and most innovative offenses in football, Frank Smith has gotten pretty much no head coaching opportunities. So it looks like if Frank Smith wants to take that next step and become a true head coaching candidate, he's going to have to go away from Mike McDaniel because, plain simply, guys, I think NFL teams are starting to pick up on this. Proximity to genius doesn't equal genius yourself. I think people are really starting to see that Mike McDaniel is definitely the brains behind that organization, and they don't necessarily feel like Frank Smith can get it done on his own. So I think if he wants to become a true head coaching candidate, similar to Eric Bieniemy last year when he went to the Commanders from Kansas City, he's going to have to get away from Mike McDaniel's shadow, and he's going to have to go to somewhere else. Then we go to number 8 here. We got T. Martin, the quarterbacks coach from the Baltimore Ravens. The Commanders talked a lot with Baltimore Ravens personnel, coaches this offseason. They really appreciate and they really like the way that organization is structured. And I think now that we get into the offensive coordinator search, T. Martin, somebody that's worked with Lamar Jackson in a year where he went from somebody that was, maybe not considered a top 5 quarterback to somebody that's now the MVP in the National Football League in 2023. And I really think T. Martin is another guy that would be another great fit if you wanted to go out and get Jaden Daniels. Of course, T. Martin has experience working with a mobile quarterback like Lamar Jackson. Most people comp Jaden Daniels to Lamar Jackson. So if you wanted to go out and get a guy like this, T. Martin is a guy that makes a lot of sense to me. Then you get to number 7 here. We get to the Sean McVay tree here, starting with Mike LaFleur, the offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. And like Brian Schottenheimer and like Frank Smith, Sean McVay would have to allow Mike LaFleur to come to Washington, but I think that would happen. He usually does that because he understands that sometimes these guys need an opportunity to be a play caller moving forward because, Sean McVay calls the offense there in L.A. Completely disastrous run with the New York Jets in his first stint as an offensive coordinator, but it might be time for him to get another shot here, especially after working right under McVay as his offensive coordinator there in the City of Angels. Then number 6 on my list, I got Eric Bieniemy. Yes, okay, so I would really be in favor of getting Eric Bieniemy back in the fold here. I mean, you look at his offense last year, I can understand why some Commanders fans don't necessarily want to see him back. Again, 25th in points per game, 24th in yards per game, all these different things. The red zone offense was really the only thing you can really look at and be like, hell yeah, that's really good right there from EB. But, I really do think that this is the type of offense, and this is the type of offensive structure that I think can work if you have the right quarterback and the right offensive line and the right personnel. And the Commanders just didn't have that last year. But when EB did have that, he had it in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes. He had it in Kansas City throughout that entire stretch where he went to 5 straight AFC championship games as an offensive play caller. And, you might be saying, oh, that's just Andy Reid or that's just Patrick Mahomes. But listen, man, Eric Bieniemy was the one calling the plays. He was the one in charge of the sequencing. And I thought he did a really good job there in Kansas City. And I really do think he deserves another shot to be an offensive coordinator here in the National Football League. So coming up here, my top 5 offensive candidates for the Washington Commanders in 2024. But before we get into that, let's have a word from our sponsor here at Fanatics. Go to chatsports.com/Taylor to get this awesome Sean Taylor t-shirt in your collection today. Listen, guys, plain and simply, we don't know what the future holds in terms of the Washington Commanders franchise. They could change their logo in the next couple of months. They could change their team name, for Christ's sakes, in the next couple of months. But you know what will never go out of style when it comes to Washington football? Sean Taylor. He's a Washington football legend. You're always going to be able to rock this t-shirt no matter what the team name is. Hell, they could even change the team colors, and this t-shirt is always going to be stylish among Washington football fans. So you can go get that right now. Go to chatsports.com/Taylor to get this awesome Sean Taylor t-shirt in your closet for a great price from our friends at Fanatics today. Then we get to the Kyle Shanahan guys here, kind of the 3 guys that are kind of being considered by most people to be kind of the next in line here when it comes to the Shanahan tree. And listen, the reason why the Shanahan guys are going to be considered here by Dan Quinn, in my opinion, is because, of course, Kyle Shanahan and Dan Quinn are good friends. Shanahan was his offensive coordinator for 2 years there in Atlanta, and that was it was the most successful stint that Dan Quinn had there in Atlanta. Matt Ryan won a freaking MVP. They went to a Super Bowl. They nearly beat Tom Brady and the Patriots in a Super Bowl with this kind of offense. So it makes sense for Dan Quinn to call up his buddy Kyle Shanahan and say, which guy is next up in your line of coaches in San Francisco right now? So what can you expect from a Shanahan offense if that's what Dan Quinn decides to bring in? So you can see lots of heavy under center stuff. So they like to do most stuff from under center, except in 3rd and long situations usually. They like to use 21 personnel, and that's a major difference between the Shanahan offense and the McVay offense. McVay likes to put 3 receivers on the field. Shanahan likes to put 2 running backs on the field, usually a halfback and then a fullback. So that's something that's a major difference. Kyle Juszczyk, of course, is used quite frequently in that offense. Then you get the multiple run scheme. McVay usually runs mostly outside zone. Shanahan mixes it up. He'll run pin and pull. He'll run trap. He'll run power along with that outside zone, really keeping defenses off balance, and it really is one of the best and one of the most effective run schemes in the National Football League today. Then also, in play action, lots of misdirection. He likes to have athletic tight ends that are able to really make cuts, really make those double moves that really make this offense super, super special. And then also loves to attack the middle of the field with crossing routes. It's one of his staples, so that's something you can expect to see if Kyle Shanahan ends up bringing in Dan Quinn brings in one of Kyle Shanahan's disciples here to the nation's capital. So you got Brian Griese, you got Chris Forster, and then you got Klint Kubiak. Those 3 are going to be the guys that are the assistants in San Francisco that are seen to be kind of next man up. Brian Griese is the quarterback's coach. Chris Forster is the run game coordinator and offensive line coach. And then Klint Kubiak is kind of that big name that's coming up. He's the number 1 offensive coordinator candidate for many teams around the National Football League right now. He's the pass game coordinator, definitely a name to watch. And then somebody that doesn't work for Shanahan directly, but is still a part of this tree there in Miami with Mike McDaniel, is Darrell Bevell, the quarterback's coach for the Miami Dolphins. And listen, man, remember, when Darrell Bevell went to Miami in Mike McDaniel's first year there in South Beach, people thought Tua Tagovailoa's career was over. And Darrell Bevell and Mike McDaniel completely helped to become arguably a top 10 quarterback in the National Football League today. And not only that, but Darrell Bevell, he worked with Dan Quinn when they won a Super Bowl in Seattle with the Legion of Boom there with Russell Wilson and Richard Sherman and all those guys. Darrell Bevell was the offensive coordinator, so they have already a relationship together. So also, Darrell Bevell, over 2 decades of NFL play calling experience. Like I said, he's won a Super Bowl as a play caller. And then, when his offense got a little bit stale over the last several years of his play calling tenure, he decided to go to Miami to learn that new school Kyle Shanahan style offense. And now I think he's ready to return to the fold as a play caller in this league. And I think he could absolutely be one of the best in the National Football League if Dan Quinn decides to hire him. He's also really good at developing quarterbacks. Russell Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa in his career. Really good stuff from him. So you're bringing in a rookie quarterback. I would absolutely love to see Darrell Bevell as the next OC of the Washington Commanders. So coming up next, the most likely offensive coordinator candidate for Dan Quinn to consider here as the next OC of this team. But before I get into that, make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you're enjoying today's video. Really do appreciate all of your support, and the real ones know the fastest and easiest way to help out the channel here is to click that thumbs up icon and like today's video. Then the number one name that's being thrown around right now is Chip Kelly, former Philadelphia Eagles and San Francisco 49ers head coach. He is currently the UCLA Bruins head coach, and Chip is known as a very revolutionary offensive mind. The staples that you would see in his offense, lots of shotgun, lots of spread concepts, quarterback run game was big on his plate when he had Marcus Mariota there with the Oregon Ducks. And then also another thing he's known for is tempo. When he was in the National Football League, every single one of his offenses was dead last in time of possession because they would move the ball so freaking fast and the defense would be on the field for it seems like the entire game. So that's one of the negatives in his offense in my opinion. But listen, man, very fast paced, keeps the defense on their toes, and he's somebody that's had a lot of success over the last several years there in UCLA. He's good friends with Dan Quinn, and he has been connected to Dan Quinn over the last several days. So it's looking like if Dan Quinn, there's one person that he's being linked to right now, it is Chip Kelly. But don't be surprised if he makes a call to Kyle Shanahan to try to find somebody from his tree either. So let me know down there in the comment section, who is your guy? Who do you want to be the next offensive coordinator of your Washington Commanders? For me, I would love to see Darrell Bevell. I would love to see Klint Kubiak. I would like Chip Kelly a little bit less, but I guess that would be fine. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section, who you want to be the next OC of the Burgundy and Gold. That'll be it for me today, Commanders fans. Thank you so much for all of your support. We're going to have another video for you guys right here on the channel, so make sure you guys click that subscribe button to never miss any of our in-depth premium Commanders coverage, 100% free all throughout the 2024 offseason.